Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Anna from Astralladytarot in Amsterdam. Today I'm doing a fun tarot tag by Julie over at Peekaboo Rose. Her video is called Deck Delights and Deterrents. And I watched so many VRs already. It's so much fun to watch. I hope you enjoy mine as well. Okay, as some of you may know, I have been getting rid of decks this year especially. Now, it was never my intention to have a large collection. I just want to have decks, tarot decks, oracle decks, whatever, decks that I use and love and really that are a delight to use, right? And I know that I have a very specific taste. Of course, that also changes and shifts, and it's good. I agree that Julie said she's using the word deterrent rather than deal breaker because, like everybody else, like every other VR that I've seen so far, the things that I thought were deal breakers, I have a few decks that definitely have those things, but we're going to get into that in the video. I am, at the moment, I feel that I'm still in the middle of this shift in practice, and it's a lot of fun to find out what I really want to do and what I want to, what my practice looks like, basically. This shift in practice really seeps into my deck collection because I am getting rid of decks like crazy. I think so far I am at, 16 deck purges in 2020 alone. Okay, this is a whole other conversation that I'm going to have with you in another video. What I'm trying to say is I have a very specific taste that also shifts, that also changes. Like many of you, my thing is I really like old things. My entire apartment is filled with old, pre-owned, vintage, maybe cheap antiques, I don't know, but old things that have a history before me and hopefully will also continue after me. It's like I am a part of their existence, of their time here. And that is just this nostalgia thing. It's golden age thinking. It all has to do with that, but it's mostly also just my taste. It's what I like. I like older things, and that definitely translates into my tarot deck collection, or deck collection, I should say. But basically what I'm trying to say here is that I really, really love vintage decks. So starting off with that, one of my delights is to find a perfect, in my opinion, perfect version, high quality version, more beautiful version, a version that has more love into it somehow, that is a better quality overall of a deck that has been on the market for a very, very long time. So, for instance, the Thoth deck, which is the deck that I use right now for clients, mostly. I did get a mass market version of that deck to trim. We're gonna get into the whole border thing anyway, but I wanted to trim that deck. Even though I trimmed it and edged it, the love, I just didn't feel it. But then I came back to this vintage greenie, and I mean, this is why I love Thoth. This is why I love vintage decks. This is why this is such a beauty for me. And this is a delight to find, and it doesn't have to be vintage, you know what I mean? It's just a delight to find, how do I explain that? English isn't my native language. There's a deck out there, right? The Thoth. It's readily available, just like the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. It's readily available, but the cardstock isn't all that. The feel of the cards aren't that great. There's copyright all over the place. And maybe the coloration is a little bit too bright, a little bit too saturated, at least for my taste. And, there are different things like, for instance, Rider-Waite-Smith suffers from a lot of blotchiness. Those are just things from my point of view, right? From my opinion that I'm not a fan of, Deterrents. And then the Thoth deck, I've said this many times, there's this pet peeve of mine with the Thoth deck that is readily available now, is that all the circles are not round. So, so you see, this vintage greenie especially is my love, and I am very grateful to have one of these. It's kind of like it solves all of those issues. So this was definitely a delight for that reason. Now, just to show you, it doesn't have to be vintage anything, because another great deck delight is with the Rider-Waite-Smith. This is, in my opinion, and I own a vintage blue box, just FYI. This is my favorite Rider-Waite-Smith version. So, you know, same thing. It's on gorgeous, thicker cardstock. Tactile experience, great. Colors, muted. Lines, very clear. What else? It's like, okay, it looks old. It's not. You can get this right now online and in many stores as well. But yeah, that's just my own personal little thing that I love about it, especially because it looks old. But yeah, what else? I mean, this is just this deck itself. You know, these types of versions are pure delights, because Rider-Waite-Smith, or the Rider-Waite deck, has been on the market for so long. But when this one came out, this was just perfect. From, well, this is what I have to work with, to this is amazing, this is all I want to work with. Well, it's not all I want to work with in my case, but for a long time it was, actually. Only downside to this deck, really, that I can think of, apart from the #TarotSoWhite, that's a thing that we should keep in mind, is the copyright on every single card, which I don't know if you can tell, but I have just sanded off. So that is something that I did to make this deck feel really old and make it a delight to work with. For what the deck itself is, the artwork and, you know, the time and all that stuff, that specific version of the deck, the Centennial version, Centennial Edition, was a delight. Like the Thoth deck, from what it is and what we can get today, the vintage greenie was the delight to get. Let's talk about borders, because I have something to say. Alright, I've already shared this in a live, I'm sure, at some point. But unpopular opinion, I love borders. Usually I love borders. They frame the cards, they make all the cards, you know, come together, and often I feel that it's part of the deck itself, of the personality of the deck, of the artwork. Now, there are definitely exceptions, for sure, but you know, it's just an opportunity to modify, really, to spend some time with the deck, to actually personalize the deck. When there are borders that are, for instance, starch white, or don't fit the deck, or have big fat copyright all over it, there are a few options, right? It's just, the deck doesn't have to be perfect right out of the box. That's just my take on it. So there are several options that you can do with the starch white, ugly, too big copyright border and all that stuff. First of all, well, you could leave it as it is, but you could scratch off the copyright, as I showed you with my Centennial Rider-Waite-Smith. You could, of course, trim the deck, cut off the borders altogether. You could color the borders. You know, all of those things are options, whereas if the majority of the tarot community, and I mean, everyone's allowed their own opinion, obviously, but there's this trend going on now with the borderless decks. If we continue requesting borderless decks all the time, and then all the decks become borderless, to me it's kind of like, well, what about the people who like borders then? Because if a deck comes with borders, we can always trim them off. But if the deck comes borderless, it's not like we have the option to add borders, right? So, I mean, this might be an opinion you've never heard before, or a stupid argument you've never heard before, but yeah, it's mine, so do with it what you will. All of my decks have borders, except for one that I'm keeping definitely, I think, the Tarot of the Magical Forest. For now, this deck is still in my collection. The reason I trimmed this one is because this is an old Lo Scarabeo deck, and if you remember, they used to, and this deck had that, print decks with borders that weren't decorative, weren't pretty to look at, and had these multiple languages with the titles of the cards on them. So, you know, maybe that helps a beginner, or that helps you to connect to the deck if it's, you know, not a system that you know or can immediately recognize. But this deck looks great without borders, I feel. Yeah, it's cool. And it's soft. It's not like it makes the deck super unclear or super chaotic. It doesn't become this mess of colors and shapes. I think it's pretty cute this way. So this one definitely needed to be trimmed. But then there are other options, right? Like, no way that I was going to trim the Halloween tarot. Instead, I colored and edged the borders black. This deck does have Deterrents, but I still love it, and I will use it every October, I'm pretty sure, at least at this point. These huge titles. I'm not sure who would really need these titles in this super obvious Rider-Waite-Smith system deck. This takes up much more of the artwork that could be there than a thin border, in my opinion. Like, the border is extra. I don't know. I do like large cards. I do like to see a lot of the artwork. I do prefer cards that are at least tarot sized or bigger. And then bigger, I really like the, you know, the cards being a little bit wider than longer, but that's just what I like to see, to have this a little bit of a landscape idea. I really like that. But I don't think I would really like this deck without borders. You know what I mean? I also really don't need 2 of imps, 9 of pumpkins, even though, okay, fine, they are imps instead of wands. They are pumpkins instead of pentacles, but I don't know. This deck does that too. Big titles and also huge borders. I must admit with this one, it feels like there could be more of the card itself, of the artwork itself, rather than this big obtrusive border. But I like this deck. I really like this deck. It's inner child deck for me. So I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't. It's good the way it is. Oh, there are so many things I could go through, and I'm going to forget half of them, but you know what? I'm just going to go through the decks that I gathered here and talk to you. I know a lot of people trimmed the Druidcraft fully, trimmed them to the image itself, but I trimmed it this way. I, like I said, love borders, especially when they are not starch white. This is a beautiful stone border. I feel that it's a part of the artwork, but I did get rid of all of those titles. Like here it would say the full 6 of Pentacles, like a full sentence. Of course, there is a contradiction to that, because I really love the borders in the Thoth with the titles. Now, there's a difference to me between titles and keywords. They're just different, and it's a conversation maybe for another day, but I really love that it's an esoteric title, that it has this deeper meaning. I don't know how to explain that, but keywords, not really a fan, but you see I have 2 decks with keywords. This is the Wildwood. Here, again, it has this whole 10 of bows, And I get why the whole title was necessary, because it's bows, it's not wands, but, you know, it's just... And then there's the keyword, responsibility. These keywords are just for this deck, right? It's not like they have the titles Lord of, like the Thoth. So it's different. I could live without these keywords, but I don't mind them, because honestly, they are part of the deck, they are part of the border especially. It's just because I didn't want to trim this deck, because I kind of am okay with these borders, even though they are starch white. So you see, contradiction. It's easy to read with this deck without looking at the full titles, being distracted by the keywords, and even maybe sometimes using that keyword in the reading itself as an extra thing that is a part of this deck. Now, the delight of the Druid Craft and the Wildwood, both artwork by Will Worthington, by the way, is that I feel transported to a different world. I really love the theme of these two decks, and you'll see that throughout, like Halloween Tarot. It's definitely, you know, jumping into Halloween world where every day is Halloween. And of course, Tarot of the Moon Garden is this huge theme that it really transports you into the world of the deck. I really appreciate that. That usually is a delight. Yeah. And then also, oh, I can't believe I forgot that. With the whole border talk, because I feel like that's the main thing in this video. I love these borders, okay? The backs, though, are borderless, which looks fabulous. So, why the new version needed to have borders is beyond me. Borderless backs? That's cool. That looks good. Okay, back to the tactile experience. With my most recent purchase, I am absolutely in love with the Living Altar Oracle. Another delight is huge cards. Delight that it's a thick cardstock, and there's this extra love in here with this spot gloss in the back. Now, Deterrent though, alright, so it feels good, and it's beautiful, it's matte, it's what we love, usually. I love matte cards, but it's rose petal finish, and although that is considered like high quality, I must say it does make the deck a little bit hard to shuffle. And you know, cards being that big already, sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle. Not super in love with rose petal finish. Another thing that is a trend I feel is minimalism in cards. Now I have this first edition Wild Unknown that I am going through again, and I've decided that I like it, so I'm keeping it because I haven't touched it in a while. So this to me is a minimalist deck because it's mostly line work, it's mostly black and white, it's pips. Something about it that I do like. It's just I can read with it. It is evocative enough for me. I do connect with it. It's just a connection, right? It's hard to explain. But like, for instance, one of the decks that I got rid of this year is the beautiful, high quality, but too minimal for my taste, Pagan Otherworlds by Usi. And although you might look at these cards from the Wild Unknown and think, well, Pagan Otherworlds there's more happening in the cards than in these ones, but I don't know, like, not in my experience. I don't really know how to explain that. There has to be, for sure, with me, a good amount of weird. Talking about weird, one of my favorite purchases this year, the Crow's Magic Tarot. This is the ugliest deck I've ever seen. I've said this multiple times on my channel, but I love it so, so much. And I connect with it, and I'm so happy to have it. Okay, so first of all, it feels good. Cardstock is this good US Games cardstock. There's this weight to the deck, just like with the 90s version that I have of the Tarot of the Moon Garden. That makes it feel like, okay, I'm actually holding something. Same with bigger cards, for instance. I'm actually holding something. Like teeny tiny, super lightweight cards doesn't feel that good to me. Now, this deck is, first of all types of strange, but it also breaks every single rule I've ever had. It has basically all the deal breakers, I think, that I ever had. And yet, love story, okay? So, it has white borders, yes. But I'm not going to trim it because that would make the cards too small, and I kind of feel that it frames the cards, it protects the cards. Been through that. Has copyright on it, but I can live with it. It's alright. This is computer art. Not super fan of computer art usually, but this is just, I don't know, transported into another world. I do feel that there is love in this deck, just like in older hand-drawn decks. Now, in a different way, for sure. But you see, I really do. Basically, a deck has to move me. That's where it all comes down to. At the end of the day, a deck has to move me. What else? Oh yeah, so not the full title, but definitely a lot of title and keywords, also keywords. So, and it has this collage feel that I used to not love. I just love it. Crow's Magic Tarot, Secret Dakini Oracle, or actually Tantric Dakini Oracle. This is collage, but I love it. Just short and sweet. I think with this deck, I stopped saying I'm not a fan of collage because this is like old school. People actually cut the paper, glued the paper onto another piece of paper. So it's definitely OG collage, I'm pretty sure. And I really like that. This deck really does feel good. And although, you know, recently I've had someone comment on the video I did a long time ago about this deck and how it was blowing my mind. Someone commented, I was really disappointed with the quality of the images, because a lot of the images are indeed very blurry. But I think that is just how they came in the magazines that they cut these images out of, and doesn't bother me at all. Actually, I really love it. Feels old. And weird enough for my collection. It's not about, is it too weird? No, is it weird enough for my collection? I love Marseille. I love the Marseille system. But I found out that I need a Marseille where more happens. So maybe again that is about the minimalism thing, that I feel sometimes cards are so incredibly, you know, abstract or too minimalist. Not enough is happening in the card. Now of course there's the other side of it where too much is happening in the card. I don't know where to look. Borders help a lot with that, by the way. But I have found out that there isn't a lot to go on. So sure, Marseille is about numerology, elements, you know, directional reading. But I also want to be moved. And so, of course, the Triomphe de la Luna Paradoxical by Patrick Valenza is checking all of those boxes. I think this is my favorite deck, one of my favorite decks for sure. All of the court cards have a very distinct personality. All of the pips, it's not just 3 coins, it's not just 3 coins and some plants, it's 3 coins, plants, faces on the coins, it's dots, it's colors, it's claws, it's thorns, it's half moons, there's a lot to go on in this deck, which is an absolute delight. And I love that, I mean, it looks like, at least, this deck was hand-drawn. So, there's that. So you see, I really love traditional, older, at least older looking decks. That's just, again, my taste, how I started talking about all the stuff that I have in my home. There's another deterrent that I think maybe I'm going to have to get over if I actually want to get a deck that I truly connect with that is more modern technology in the cards. Now you see, the experience of tarot cards and the overall spiritual practice for me is very much about being in the moment and being with myself, as in, I'm not a machine, I'm not a robot, I am made of flesh and blood. That is what I want to connect with. I don't want to be distracted, like laptops, phones. When I read my cards, I close the laptop or I put it away, just so that I'm not distracted by a screen, right? Because that is such a distraction. Put it away for a second so that you can focus, so that I can focus on journaling my thoughts and the feelings and the cards, between me and the cards. That is that very important centering moment. So whenever I see that a deck has cards with this modern technology that I so very much take care of putting away, it doesn't, I don't know, at least it could change, but at this moment I kind of feel like technology is everything. Technology is everything that we have. Technology is a table, right? Technology are chairs. Technology is a book. But modern technology, the way that we know it today, is all about, at least for me, most of all, distractions. And yes, they make life easier, but they also make life harder. They make life go a little bit too fast. And tarot practice or spiritual practice is about slowing down often, right? To actually feel and center and be aware again. So I think that is a major reason why I still reach for older decks. Alright, we went through a lot of decks and it's getting really dark out here, but really what it all comes down to is a deck has to move me. There has to be a connection, and this connection can be instant and then fade away, or instant and stay, or it can grow over time. And I think there's really no right or wrong. It's really just some decks really hit the spot no matter what deterrents or deal breakers are in there, and others can do everything right when it comes to the lights, you know, things we've discussed in this video, but then the connection isn't there. So I think that it's really a good tag to see what is happening now, what are the thoughts, what's going on. Could have gone much deeper, but this is just me being a tarot nerd and talking about cardstock and borders. But you know, I think there's a place for that in the tarot community online as well. But I think that this discussion that is happening with these VRs is really interesting to see what people are looking for. That may change in a few years. Maybe people will get bored of rose petal, of borderless, of small cards. What else did I talk about? Alright, thank you so much. I think that's it. We've discussed a lot of nerdy stuff, but I know that there are people out there that are as nerdy as I am, so hope you enjoyed this. Hope you could see it, even though it's getting really, really dark. Wait, how late is it now? Oh my god, it's 3:45. Crazy. But of course the original video is going to be linked below. Thank you so much, Julie, for making this fun video, and I'm looking forward to seeing your comments, and of course I will watch the other VRs as well. Please like the video, please comment below and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Thank you so much.